Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unlocking the Secrets of Adult ADHD. I am Peter Freer. I am the founder, CEO, and president of Unique Logic and Technology, the folks that bring you Play Attention. And we are delighted that you're here because this is a very, very important webinar, especially for those of us who are living with ADHD as adults. Now, you should know who you're talking with or watching at this point, but my background is actually in education. I began teaching students, both children and adults, who had ADHD 30 some years ago. And naively, since I had a background in science, physics, mathematics, computer programming, I thought I would create a game that would help, right, fix these problems. And I began to use neurotech. I found out that NASA was using neurotech to train pilots and astronauts how to stay attentive in states of really hyperarousal and then in very low hypoarousal where they were bored. I enhanced that, received patents on it because I was fusing executive function with neurotech at the time. And since then, I have lectured at the United Nations. I've appeared in Time magazine and many other places. So I've been in this field of neurotechnology and ADHD for many, many, many years. And I have worked with many thousands of people. So what I tell you today and what we discuss together will be part of that experience. You should always know what it is and who it is that you're listening to. So I'd like to do this as a fireside chat. In other words, I'd like to present some things, but I also want to open it for discussion. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box, and I will attempt to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. So we'll start with that kind of fireside chat so that it resonates with you and that you understand more about what the situation is. That, when you're living with ADHD, it's not that everyone around you understands it very well and you understand it very well. So we'll discuss it so that it becomes clearer to everyone here what it's like living with it and how we can use it as a superpower, because there are many people who can use ADHD as a superpower. I really want you to understand how that happens, because there are folks, and I actually drew this from an article I read years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago in Inc. magazine, about Bill Gates and Ingvar Kamprad. I probably just murdered his name, but he's the head of IKEA, Richard Branson, a bunch of super executives they had, because it's Inc. magazine, talking about how they use it as a superpower. And that's the top secret. Wouldn't everyone want to know? Well, how do I use it as a superpower? So that I'll share with you at the very end on how they do that, how that is managed. We'll talk about executive function and the role of play attention in developing executive function as well toward the end. Now, I did just borrow slides directly from our website because our website is very good. And this is one on our adults page. And this is a beautiful slide in that we are constantly searching for ways to improve our lives now. Living with ADHD is not easy, and I'm probably preaching to the choir at this point. It can be difficult, it can be joyous at times, and it can be catastrophic at times. And so when we're talking about it today, we're searching, and the fine print on this slide, your response is your power. So I'm hoping that by the end of the webinar today, I will have empowered you to understand your situation far better than you have before this webinar. Your ability to change your life, to renew your life, is within grasp. Is everyone clear? It's not impossible. It's within your grasp, but it has to be done properly. And I'll help you with that in today's webinar, because part of changing our lives is having support. And that's one of my primary roles here today, is that I'm going to provide support to you for doing just that, for being able to make changes in your life. Clear so far? So we'll talk about some of the issues that we all face when we're living with ADHD. Many times at my job, I really want the promotion, but I seem to be passed over all the time, or I am stuck in a rut at work. Now, is that because I have poor planning? I have a difficult time planning. I have poor organizational skills. Am I impulsive? Do I blurt things out and go, oh man, why did I ever just say that? Or my friends come to me and go, did you just call Bill an idiot? And I wake up and go, oh man, I can't believe I just said that. Does this sound familiar? If it does, you can raise your hand. Because this is oftentimes what we tend to do. If we're living with ADHD, we tend to do that, right? We have to understand that there are things that it carries with us that we really don't have a lot of control over right now. Do we have problems focusing on a task or completing tasks? Do I have trouble initiating a task? Do I start 50 projects and I finish none of them? And that reflects a little bit back to my lack of promotion at work, right? Because my employer seems really happy, because if he asks, will you take this on? And I'll go, yes, I'll take it on. Do I finish it? No. Again, this may sound highly familiar to you. If they say, can you get this done by next Friday? I'll say yes. Do I ever get it finished by next Friday because I can't complete a task? I get sidetracked? Yes, that's me as well. That's part of living with ADHD. Now, facing a relationship, I'm going to spend a little more time on this, because this is perhaps one of the most serious aspects, significant aspects of living with ADHD. And since no one here, I'll ask questions just to get consensus among all of us here. But how many people here face this? If you are living with someone who has ADHD, or if you're living with ADHD personally, how many people here have a problem in relationships? Great. And I'm being very patient because they are flowing in. Okay. So everyone here understands that this is highly problematic when you have ADHD. So I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, if you're living with ADHD, I think there are three primary things you have to ask yourself. Number one is, how does ADHD affect my relationship? How does it affect my role in this relationship? And the third question I must ask is, can I stand in my partner's shoes and get their perspective? So I'm going to go over that again. There are three primary questions. If you wish to turn around a relationship crisis, I'm going to mention these three questions again, right, that you have to ask yourself daily. How does living with ADHD affect my relationship with my partner, or with everyone, really? But say we'll focus it on your partner, right? Number two, what role does ADHD have in this relationship? What role is mine in this relationship? And number three, can I look at what my partner sees? Can I stand in my partner's shoes? Now, let me just bring up to you why this is so important, because if you're the person with ADHD who is here now, then typically in your relationship, you feel that you're being micromanaged. You know, I've talked with literally thousands of ADHD people, and they think, number one, they're nagged by their other half. They feel I am constantly being scrutinized. I can't do anything right. They're nagging me all the time to do this or that, and they're micromanaging my life. If that resonates with you, would you raise your hand? Very good. Yes, that's a lot of us here. And there are many of us here in attendance. So this is a significant problem. So let me I've described how you feel as the person with ADHD. Let me describe how your partner feels. Your partner feels neglected, that you don't pay enough attention, that you act too impulsively and don't get things done. You're argumentative, and they feel lonely. They feel neglected. They feel that you don't care. Now, this feeling of theirs that you don't care is probably not true. You probably dearly love them. But what they feel is what is important. So that was my third question I put to you. Can you stand in your partner's shoes and understand what it is that your partner is feeling? Because it doesn't matter if you go, I love them. I'm crazy about my family. It's what they feel that's important, and that you must take under scrutiny and examine daily. How does ADHD affect my relationships? Yes, and when we do that, what role does ADHD have in this? I have to understand that role. If I understand the role, and that's a large part of today's webinar, can I get to understand how ADHD affects me and how then it affects my relationships? That's critical. So that's what we're examining today. Because if you do understand this, here's where we change it, things that are catastrophic to a relationship, into superpowers that engage me in the relationship. So if I do understand the role that ADHD plays, I can change it. But I have to have due consideration so I do understand that. Can I take responsibility personally to make these changes? And lastly, can I stop fighting and learn to communicate and act as a team, as a partnership? That's where we must go. So again, some of the goals today are to understand what we experience and what our goals could be. Our experience is, I know that ADHD affects the way I am in my relationships. If I take a look at what my partner is feeling, I can see it's very painful to them. And it's very painful to me to be micromanaged and nagged that I feel, right? And that's real to us. You have to understand what they're feeling. So once I understand the role of ADHD, I can begin change, right? I can spark change. But this is really kind of critical. And that's again what we're going to examine as we move forward. Because if you are to have an effective relationship, it has to become a partnership, a team. And there are things that have to happen. So we'll discuss that as we move forward again, because all of this is interrelated. So I'm not feeling 100%. Either maybe I don't want to get out of bed, I'm depressed, or maybe I'm exactly the opposite. I am super energetic and I will do anything for anybody just so that I don't make them mad, and I try to please them. And this comes from the fact that, maybe from a very young age, I was told that I'm not very smart. I was told that I was lazy. And I began to believe it after a while, even though I am actually very bright. I begin to believe those things. If people tell me them often enough, I begin to believe them. So I just don't even know at times why I'm bothering to get out of bed. Right. And so I want to make everyone aware that this, what people tell you and the way they see you account for the way that you feel. If I'm feeling like I'm not 100%, it is because internally something is awry. Indecisiveness. And I made this slide on my own. And I think it's actually very funny. Can anyone here tell me what is odd about these words? Can anyone tell? You send it in chat. Wow, no one's seen it yet. Well, people say, well, it's misspelled, different spellings. But take a look at the very first spelling and then the very last one. All right. So the very last one and the very first one are the same, aren't they? And the very last one is spelled correctly. The very first one was spelled correctly. So this is part of the problem when we have indecisiveness. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Yes, and Laura says, is it second guessing yourself? Absolutely, it's second guessing myself. How many of us here are stuck in that cycle where I overthink this so much, I have so much info in my head, I can't possibly make a decision. As a matter of fact, I will ask anybody else to make the decision for me. Making sense? Right? And lacking confidence from Linda, I lack confidence to do it. And how many people experience this? I get anxiety. I'm anxious, and it causes me a bit of fear to make choices because I constantly doubt myself to do this. All right. So we actually have so many points here when we're looking at indecisiveness. Then how does the word procrastination sound to you at this point? Does that just flow right in here? Since I have anxiety or fear of making choices, I just don't make them. And if I do make them, a lot of times it's at the last minute and it's too late. And this reflects back to my work performance. Right? Wanda says that's the worst habit. Ouch. Yes, absolutely. It is so hard to get around though. And it all begins up here. Right? We have to understand this. We understand that it begins here. And so we have to be able to understand exactly what's happening, which is my goal today, so that we understand what's happening, and then we can affect change, right? Or self-esteem. So this started, with the slides earlier when we talked about not feeling 100%. But if I don't feel 100%, because perhaps other people blame me for my symptoms as an adult now, I'm not a child any longer. And many people say, look, you just can't get out of your own way. How about just giving it trying harder? Give it a try, and you're going to be fixed. And we've all tried that. And we all know that does not work. We all try harder. As a matter of fact, ADHD people probably try harder than everyone else to get things right. Now, we're not often successful. A lot of times we have problems and we fail. Sometimes it's a glorious victory. But many times, and that's the reason you're here today, is because we don't have the tools to do this. So if people blame me for my symptoms, I begin to go, yeah, I'm just an idiot. I just can't do this. It's too hard. And they say, you don't try hard enough. So I try harder than everyone else to please everyone else. Do you see the pattern? Do you recognize the pattern? That's the question. They say your willpower can change everything. Well, if that's true, we would all will ourselves to be millionaires, right? And that's not happening. It's got to be something else that helps us internally, that helps us be less indecisive, have better self-esteem. So this actually reflects a little bit back to our indecisiveness. If I have poor self-esteem, I'm afraid of failure. And it makes it difficult to pursue my dreams. If I can't pursue my dreams because I'm afraid to, I have indecision. I'm not going to jump into that. And this also is incredibly difficult for all of us as we, meander through life, And then on top of that, if I have a fear of failure and commitment, and it's difficult for me to pursue goals, then many times I will, and this is what I mentioned previously, I will do anything to please other people. Anything, right? I will work my hardest to be a people pleaser. Now, does that work for me? Do I usually come out on the back end of that not very well? And everybody else is kind of dissatisfied, even though I'm trying my hardest to be a people pleaser. So that happens. And then, of course, with poor self-esteem, I feel isolated and lonely because of the fact that I may actually have something called RSD. And I did a full webinar on that. If you have not watched the RSD webinar, I really strongly suggest you do. It's on Google, and we can send you a link if you're interested in that. RSD, if you haven't heard about that, is called rejection sensitive dysphoria or rejection sensitivity dysphoria. That means that I can't take any more rejection. I've had so much rejection in my life. I find it extraordinarily hard to cope with, difficult to cope with. And so that is called RSD, or rejection sensitive dysphoria. This is part of poor self-esteem, right? A lot of people are saying, yes, please send the link. So we will send everyone a link with this. By the way, we are recording this video, so this webinar. So we will make certain you can also get a copy of it sent to you if you wish as well. And by the way, if you have extreme rejection sensitivity dysphoria, it can not only lead to poor self-esteem, but it could lead to you feeling bad enough to ideate on harming yourself in some way or the other. So if that is true right now, I want you to leave this webinar. If you are thinking about harming yourself in any way, leave the webinar and call your support hotline. I believe for most of the United States, that's 811. And so for anyone that is ideating like that, you don't belong here. You need to talk to someone who can give you immediate support for ideating about self-harm. So if that is you, make certain you leave immediately and talk to someone about that. That is called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD, part of this poor self-esteem. If I'm not able to control much of my life, it is important that I'm able to self-regulate my temper, my frustration. And if I do not, then of course it affects my relationships, it affects my job, it affects every aspect of my life. And you're probably quite aware of this right now. I can't cope with too much stress. I feel inundated. I feel overwhelmed by stress. And this, again, is incredibly important that we learn how to cope with stress because it's a reality. Life is stressful. And it is not always stressful. Many times it is stressful. How we cope with it is critical. There was everyone here probably knows who Mike Tyson is, the famous boxer. Mike had an extremely good coach early on. His name was Cus D'Amato. Cus is an old-time boxing coach. Cus had the greatest saying about stress and fear. He said, stress and fear are like electricity. It can either bake your bread or it can burn your house down. Depends on how you use it. Remember that. How you cope with it can change you into a superstar, or it can just get you into a mindful, painful state of loneliness and stress and feeling that you're overwhelmed. It's how you cope with it. And that's part of the superpowers we're going to talk about in just a little bit. This slide is so meaningful to all of us here. And what has caused me to become more ADHD? Is it my age? My responsibilities? Am I overly anxious now? Did my menopause cause me? Because I never really realized I had ADHD until menopause hit. Right? Some of us are here and saying that I didn't realize it. Did COVID cause it? Because now I can't remember much of anything and I have trouble focusing. Is it stress? Is it genetics? So, to be honest with you, it could be any of these, it could be others, it could be combinations of a variety of things, everything from trauma to traumatic brain injury to age-related or genetics. Could be so many answers to what has caused me to become more ADHD. Now, you can try to peel this onion for the rest of your life because if you ask the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer, right? Asking the wrong question inevitably leads to the wrong answer. So if you're sitting there pondering, what has caused me to become more ADHD? That's not the right question. The question is, how do I turn what I have into an advantage? How do I improve my life? That's the question to ask. And the answer to that, obviously, is that if we are living with ADHD, it is a brain-related condition. If that is true, and it seems to be scientifically evident, that is true. What is the possibility of me to change that? Because the brain, just a few years ago, we said, oh, the brain, as we grow older, it's all downhill from there. Forget it. You're not going to make any changes. And that's absolutely untrue. We are capable, no matter what age, the brain is capable of rewiring itself, of making significant change. As a matter of fact, scientists now know that if we adhere to being active, physically active and mentally active as we age, we have a much greater chance of being healthy, both mentally and physically. So this is very, very important. You can try to peel this onion and figure out why I've become more ADHD or why it's more important now than ever before. Or you can do something about it. You can actually rewire the way that your brain operates, right? And it is something that we start very early on. In infancy, we teach a child to speak. We teach a child to eat on their own, to tie their shoes. The brain is incredibly plastic. As we age, that neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, is still there. So let's talk about how we actually facilitate this, how we affect change. Adult ADHD superpowers. Right? I told you earlier, this is a great, straight from the article in Inc. magazine, how people with ADHD can be hugely successful. And they cite everyone from Walt Disney to Einstein, to Bill Gates, to Jim Carrey, to Richard Branson, right? Their short attention spans were no longer a weakness. They learned to turn it into success. And that's what we're here to find out. How do we do that? Right? That's the big secret that we're, going to learn today. How is that done? Because it is done. I have been working on this for 35 years, and we have changed the lives of thousands and thousands of people in just using neurotech very, very simply. And I'll show you how we do it. But here's the superpowers that you already possess. Unlimited energy. If you are interested, right? If you are interested and you have passion for what you're going to do, all of a sudden you have this unlimited energy that comes out of your body. That body that didn't want to get out of bed yesterday has a project that is really close to your heart, and you have unlimited energy. So, to be honest with you, you can use this superpower, right? We also have the superpower of hyper focus. I can get on something that I am really interested in and work on that project all night long till I try to get it done. So I try to get it finished by morning. I think outside the box. I have abundant creativity. I think of 30 different ways to solve that problem. But I can also pick out simple solutions. I am willing to take a risk without thinking. Sometimes that really works well for me as a superpower. I can multitask. I can do 4 or 5 things at a time. I am tenacious. I will persevere. I will stay after a problem and go after it and like a dog on a bone until I get that resolved. And I am at times highly sensitive. Now, those can be superpowers, right? And I'm going to refer back to Customata. They can be. They can either bake your bread or burn your house down. So how do we get there? How do we get to the point where they're not burning our house down anymore? How do we get to where they are superpowers, true superpowers? So I'd like you to examine this slide very carefully. Here are your superpowers. And this other section is called executive function. Executive function, for those who are unfamiliar, is a series of cognitive skills that help us perform daily. So if I have unlimited energy, but I don't have mental flexibility to adjust if something changes within my plan, I have all this unlimited energy. But if I don't have the ability to be mentally flexible, something will throw a gear into that abundance of energy. Is everybody with me? I have all this passion and energy flowing, and all of a sudden there is a wrench thrown into my gears. That's mental flexibility. And as an executive function, being mentally flexible is if something happens to throw a wrench in my gears, I am able to swiftly change and then reorient myself to finish. The problem is if I don't have that skill and I have unlimited energy, I'll just keep throwing more energy into it, and then the outcome is generally not so good. Does everyone understand how this affects you and where you are? Does this resonate within you right now? You know the fact that if you're passionate about it, if you're interested in that subject, you have unlimited energy. You also know that many times I'm not mentally flexible. You throw a wrench in there, I'm done. I don't know what to do at that point. I hope this makes sense. My hyper focus. I can hyper focus to get things done, but if I didn't pay attention to details, which is part of executive function, what I have is not what I really intended to do. Is that making sense? I can hyper focus to get something done, but if I don't pay attention to the details, what I come out with, and when I turn it into my employer, they go, that's not what we were discussing yesterday. I hope that resonates. I have abundant creativity, but then if I can't be organized, which is an executive function skill, all my creative process, all of my creativity looks like this spattering of graffiti on a wall because I never was able to organize it. So then, simple solutions. I can create simple solutions, but if I don't plan them out, they don't solve anything. So each one of these has a counterpart in executive function. I take risks without thinking. Sometimes those risks really work well for me, but many times I get injured, sometimes physically, and sometimes it's just I blurt things out because my impulse control is not strong enough to keep me from saying something I really shouldn't or quickly doing something that I regret later. That's called self-regulation or impulse control. Multitasking. I can do 40 different things at one time. But if I don't have good task initiation and task completion, we talked a little bit about this, or indecisiveness, then multitasking doesn't get me anywhere. I'll start 50 projects and I will finish none. And sometimes some of those projects I won't even get started because I'm overthinking it. I hope this is resonating. I can be tenacious. I can work on that problem. I can get after it like a dog on a bone. But if my emotion regulation is not good, I could blow my fuse. I could feel overwhelmed. I could have a very high intolerance for just not, if I am intolerant and I get frustrated, so it could raise my frustration level up quite a bit. And then whoever's around me, they're in for it. So everybody, I hope this is making sense. And then sensitivity. I can be sensitive, but if I'm overly sensitive, then I think people are nagging me, right? Or I think they're criticizing me. So I have to self-monitor. That's the executive function. That's a correlate. If I can self-monitor, I can go, oh, you know what? I didn't finish that. I better get that done. Or not just saying, he's a jerk for telling me I didn't get it finished. These all have to have, if I am to make superpowers out of what I can do right now, which is what the execs did that we were talking about, something has to happen. And that is development of executive function. This is the top secret that all the execs use. They develop their executive function so it gives them cognitive control. Cognitive control means in here, instead of things running me, I'm running them, which gives me consistency in life. It gives me consistency in my relationships with others. It gives me consistency in my ability to start, not being indecisive, to start projects, finish them, right? It gives me all of that. But how do they get it? And why don't I have it? That's the next question. Well, they've undertaken a method of study for them of introspection and study on how to do it, how to change these things. And the first place they started, I've already given you. Because our goal today, our first goal, was to gain an understanding of how we're existing right now, and then how that affects our lives. And I think that's the first thing that I said we were going to cover. And I think we've now embraced that. Is everybody with me? We now kind of understand how this puzzle fits together a little bit. I understand more about what people see in me. I understand about what I'm doing. Is everybody with me on that? Raise of hands. Are we following so far? Do you follow? Do you track me? Okay, super, super, super. Thank you so much. So now we're here to a point where we see the other people who have been really successful, who are ADHD, who live with ADHD. What do they have that I don't have? They have cognitive control. They have executive function, which means cognitive control. And it means that provides consistency. And here's the last piece of this puzzle. They have surrounded themselves with people who back them up, with people who are not going to just sit and tell you you're not trying hard enough. Because if you're surrounding people, yourself, with people like that, you are not going to succeed. You have to have people who understand you and who can give you guidance. That's a support team. I can't emphasize that enough. It's very difficult to do on your own. If you have a support team, you're very likely to improve. So you can't just think it's going to be you and you alone. Get yourself a team and start right after we finish with the webinar today. Start by making a list of those people who can help you be a better you, who can help you navigate life, and who are not going to tell you you're lazy or you're stupid or you're not trying hard enough, or just if you had more willpower, you're going to make a change. Because if you're surrounding yourself with them, you're destined for failure. Surround yourself with people who love you and who are going to give you support. Now, support may not always be in a nice, it's not going to always be a nice slice of pie. Support may mean that you have to be able to hear them and take comments and take adjustments, and you make adjustments according to some of the comments. That's important. So I love this slide, and I put it in here for a reason. If I take you to the top of this mountain with me right now, and you don't have the skills to go down here, you have your superpowers as an ADHD, a person living with ADHD, you have enthusiasm, you will make a decision on the fly, you'll hyper focus on this. You with me? And what are our chances if you don't have the skills that underlie this, that support me in being able to go down the mountain on a pair of skis? What are your chances of making it? Right? You can have the superpowers, but to get down this slope, I have to have the underlying skills with it. And I have to be good at those skills. Then we'll get down safely, like the skier in front of us here. We'll get down safely and we'll have a really fun, wild ride. But the key to this is that I have to have the underlying skill set to do it. I can't just be enthusiastic. I can't just hyper focus. I can't just think outside the box. I have to have the executive function, the cognitive control, all the skills that are going to help me get down this mountain. In this case, I better be darn good on a set of skis that had practiced and gotten those skills together to make it down the slope. Otherwise, it could be catastrophic. Everybody with me? You following so far? Thank you. Thank you. So the top secret is developing your executive function. Everything from working memory to impulse or inhibitory control, huge factor in how we run our lives. And for those of you who are not familiar with inhibitory control, this was studied by Stanford University many, many years ago, and it's still being studied today. And how many people here have heard of the marshmallow test? I love bringing this up. How many people here have heard of the marshmallow test? Okay, only a few of us. All right. So the marshmallow test was for young children. They put a child in front of a camera, and the camera was at times just hidden, so they couldn't really tell they were being filmed. And they would give that child a marshmallow. The psychologist would leave the room and say, if you don't eat that marshmallow, I'll bring you back a second marshmallow. So you'll have two marshmallows, but just don't eat that first one, because if you eat the first one, you're not getting a second. And they left the camera on, and some of the children had really good inhibitory control. They would sit there and look away from the marshmallow. They would tap their hands on the desk. Others would pick it up and smell it and put it back down. Then others that didn't have the inhibitory control would pick it up and they'd lick it, then put it back down. Then they take a little tiny bite of it, and then a bigger bite, and then they just stuff it all in their mouths. So why is this important? Well, they followed up on those that had good inhibitory control and those that didn't. The ones with poor inhibitory control made less money in life, had far poorer relationships with everyone else. They did not generally have good educations. A lot of them were substance abusers. Whereas the folks that did have, the kids that grew up and did have good inhibitory control, made far more money, were much more successful in life, had good educations, and far better personal relationships. So one term here, inhibitory control, means a lot. You must be able to master that. And that's part of executive function. Planning, prioritizing, organization, that's all part of executive function. Remember, you can have all the other superpowers, but unless you can plan and prioritize and organize, then you don't have a successful superpower. The superpowers that we listed are all there for you. Now, here's how you make them work for you, right? This is how you make them work for you. All of these we've discussed. How do we make them work for you? And this is why I developed Play Attention many years ago. I fused together executive function with neurotechnology. And if you can see on the screen here, if you look at her wristband, it is the body wave unit that we use, which allows us to take a peek at when your brain is really engaging with the screen in front of you. And on that screen in front of you in Play Attention, we give you games that develop executive function, that teach you inhibitory control, that teach you working memory, spatial memory, short-term memory, that teach you how to plan and organize. And all of those skills that we talked about, we do. And this is key, because this is the secret. This is how we train to do it. It is not going to flow into your brain by medication. Medication is a Band-Aid on your problem. However, underneath, you still have a problem with executive function. So you may note that you can change, you can take your medicine and you may perform a bit better at work, but your relationship is still unhealthy. Many of you probably have already witnessed this. because medication does not teach skills. It doesn't teach you how to take what you have and make it into a superpower. Training does. And therein lies the rub. This takes time. This takes training, but you can do it for 10 minutes a day, right? It takes time, right? This kind of training will last you about a half a year to 3/4 of a year. But from then on, you'll typically carry it for life. Now, this has been studied in children who use the play attention system through Tufts University School of Medicine. And it was done in the Boston City Public Schools, funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And they tested play attention out in developing executive function. And Tufts didn't think that it was really necessary to use neurotech as we use in play attention. They just said, brain training is brain training. We're just going to give them brain training games. And what we said is, this is an advance. Todd wants to know, is it neurofeedback? This is an advancement of neurotech, neurofeedback, and that you don't see any brain waves. You just are learning to engage yourself fully. That's what the band does. It teaches you to engage yourself fully in games that teach you how to improve executive function and gain cognitive control and consistency. Plus, you have a brilliant support team who cares for you for your life of use. If you have play attention for 15 years, you're going to be able to use the support team. So we help you start and surround yourself with people who are interested in changing your life and teaching you how to do it. So this is, what we thought of many, many years ago, and this is what we do. To help you get started, there's an ADHD test. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and put that out for everyone here. So let me send this to you. You can take the ADHD test. It's right on the website. And let me send that. And you can see that link right there. All right. So go ahead and you can go to the site, take the test, and that will help everyone here learn, what your specific skill sets are and where you really need to get some assistance. Because we can customize play attention to do that for you. You can also schedule a one-to-one consultation, right? It's free. Go ahead and just get a consultation with one of our experts who can consult with you to make certain that we understand what you need and what you can do to improve life. All right. Again, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I hope you've learned from it, the webinar, and also take a look at the rejection sensitive dysphoria as well. We look forward to working with you. Take care.